BTWRLM181. That's pleasant, isn't it? Just those nice cricket sounds. Lull you off into the night. Or you get clubbed in the head by Bigfoot. It's all around us. Everything that's going on is all around us to see, and we seem to be blind to it. We'd rather make up stories about it. I guess that's where I get most frustrated. And I'm getting to more understand that maybe we make those stories up just so we don't engage it. And I'm trying to show you every week. You can take just about everything you see, just about, it seems anymore. In fact, there's so much. I didn't even hardly put anything up on my tabs from the stuff I have to get to from last week. That's ongoing methodological things that you need to know if you're interested, that you can grab up and use. Very forceful, powerfully and forcefully in the way, not force and violence, but force in countering this affront to, this insult to us all. And I don't understand why we don't feel that it's a big enough insult to respond to, that we have everything I look at anymore can be reduced. And typically it's in the negative stuff. It's not that we don't always look at the negative, but that's what we have to stop, that's the problem. That's why a lot of the times we don't hear a lot of happy, joy. I think when we went there, we'd be talking about creative, cool things that were going on. That we may face one day. That I attempt to come to tell you, and I say attempt, I'm telling you what I know is the truth by experience and the wisdom from that, and what we do, and the people I work with, that works. Not a lot of conjecture, no silver bullet. There's a certain methodology you can take, and you can bring this thing forward on whatever you find. You start to learn how to do this, and you can go wherever you find it wrong, you can make it right. I try to do this. I say I try because I am giving it to you, and I don't know if it's received to action. You just get frustrated over and over, and the last few weeks I'm not getting very tolerant to just seeing a lot of stuff going on that I just have to shake my head over. What have we become? Who are we? I don't even know if I put myself in the same place as a lot of people I see doing other things. And just the generic hypocrisy that's out there is really stunning. And I'm not mean to a perfection level. I mean to everyone's got their life to live, and so there's these weights, these balances you have to bring. But to just outwardly act different or contrary to what your words are has really been stunning. But that's an aside point where I want to start today. I'm already going on someplace else. There's evidence out there. I want to get to the point that I bring every week. For those of you that are listening and trying to do this thing for yourself to understand better and to work better, and a lot of times I would have to say contrary to what I find on the internet that you will find. I find it more and more difficult to even say anything because it sounds more and more like I'm going to be contrary to most everybody that I hear talking about what to do. And that, for some reason, that bothers me a little bit. I don't like to be sounding like, I know that I'm correct. I don't know about right, but I'm correct and we have to go a big jump in a better direction really, really quickly, that I don't see a lot of people making that big jump. I see lots of people talking, but I don't see people doing. And I don't know what to say. I see some of the chats after I get in, and the log that you have. I don't get all the log because some of it's truncated, but I get to see some comments, and some people you'll respond to what I'm saying, and you're not getting I can just see you're not getting the point, and I don't have the ability to tell you through the chat about the point that's being missed. And so I ask again, really listen to what I'm trying to tell you. Even maybe you work a little. Maybe I'm not doing the right thing to tell you this, how this works, but listen for what I'm trying to tell you to do. Even though I know it comes fast, I can't. There's just something about that I can't stop it. it just comes out, starts to come out, and it gains momentum, and it gains speed and goes faster and faster. And every once in a while I'll catch myself and slow myself down, try to go slower, because I just know it's a lot of information, and you have to pick it up. So I guess maybe I'm starting to turn into talking through a little bit of frustration, as I've been watching us for years walk into the same problems and things, and the evidence for us to start using is right there. In fact, I threw some stuff in the chat and at freedomsnetwork.com, just some information. I'm not going to get to it. One of them was there's a story out right now about the DHS is paying federal money for local checkpoints. It's a list of 10 or so checkpoints. They're now going to add another one. And I looked at that and I said, here's all the evidence that you need to anticipate when they start to do this locally, because they don't do this everywhere. They don't get everyone riled up. And if you saw that you could anticipate that, you could be ready in order to address what they're going to do, which that article starts to show you. Whether or not it's absolutely right or wrong is irrelevant. You need to do the hard work behind proving it all. Not the existence of the checkpoints, but the thing that they're going to do and how it's wrong. And I said in the Freedoms Network feed line the posting section, I just said, here's a heads up, here's a preparation, and a time to prepare and make your bag o' law on how you're going to address this. And I'm not going to get too more into that. I talk about the bag of law about in the mining context and the highway context. It's about your highway law, not your motor vehicle code. And you put these things that other people are finding as the wrong, and you have that ready. You put that in the bag of law in a clear plastic bag, and you show them you have a word in your mouth when you address, in the first instance, the first point of contact, what these cops are doing or not doing, and how they're violating you. In other words, when you find a statute in your state that the officer's not supposed to violate rights or remedies or anything, that's where you start. You start from there. You're not supposed to be doing this. You're not supposed to mischaracterize what I do. You're not supposed to hold this blockade in the highway, first of all. Secondly, as a checkpoint for a pretense or pretext of an actual federal imposition, which requires certain standards under the federal Constitution. Have a certain thing ready to say when this starts to happen. To me, those 10 things are just 10 on a heap and pile of what you'll address in days when you go out around and be confronted by certain people that are walk around with big-chested authority in a costume they wear as we're coming into Halloween. How fast did this year go? And we're still crickets for what we have to do. But so here's some evidence, folks. It's kind of interesting. This doesn't happen all the time, but if you're the one that this happens to, then good for you. I don't want to see you get involved, but when you're going to be involved with these costumed ones, you need all the evidence you can get. And this one is, to me, very cool. Didn't like to hear the interaction. The guy is able to walk away, so we're not talking about a deadly shooting type, killed by cop. But you're looking to develop these kinds of things where a cop steals a man's phone, then cops steal a man's phone, then accidentally record themselves on his phone, conspiring to falsely charge him. Now, what I found fascinating about this, again, so there's the evidence. You have it. You can just watch the video. I'll give you the link. You can see all this. Was a discussion about this event that going on, and he was a open carry. He wants to make a point, and not to say don't do it, but you're coming to a day, folks. You're in the day. You can't even surrender to the cops, and you'll be shot. So this is becoming a very thin line now, a thin veil between life and death with these people, which is why you should be addressing these face-on, which is why I'm even talking about this. The guy was doing making signs for these checkpoint. It said it was ahead. And, the cops don't like that. About an hour, I guess they started losing business. They went down the road to see what was going on. They found this guy with a sign saying, hey, there's a checkpoint ahead. And so then they actually got in and said, well, they were getting people saying that your gun, they're afraid of your gun. And that's what the excuse was that they confronted this guy with. Well, if you look in how they do this, you can know this is going to happen at some point. You can start being prepared on what you say. And the guy went through what he thinks is his rights about it. My thought was, well, since we have a right to bear arms, what does it matter what the public thinks? Who are they to overwhelm my right that you are called in to waste your time with me when you apparently have more important things to do, would be at least an opening discussion I would have, and I guess we all have our discussion, so that I'm not going to be judgmental on this. I just would be preparing my foundation a lot quicker to avoid this. But they take his phone anyway, and they leave it running. 80 IQ minus, folks, is all I can tell you. But luckily for us, it still happens. And when I hear this, I say, well, I want a device that you can't turn off. That's what my answer to what that is. I want a device when I'm recording. I don't want to have it turned off unless I have a special way to turn it off so they can't get the thing turned off. Why? Because I am always now knowing I'm in a perpetual evidence gathering situation, whether that's their evidence against me or my evidence against them. And so this is an interesting view that they take his camera, they actually catch them on the video, which they hand back to him again. So he has the video, places it on YouTube, where they conspire together on how they're going to make the charges look like there's something to validate why they were getting in his face, which is probably over the fact that he's having a sign warning off people from their checkpoint, which another story I won't post. I put in the chat last night. It says there's 10 different ways why they do those, and they're all no good, and why. And so you have a bag of law you can build with all these facts. Well, here's another one. Bring a camera, bring a phone, bring one that I say you can't. They can't. Once you start it, they can't turn it off. You might be able to, but they can't. And so when they take their phone, you get another opportunity to catch them doing this kind of thing. This was done in Connecticut as well. So what got me, though, is all through this, and you hear how they set this up, and you know this goes on, and you can hear they've been doing this forever. They do this all the time. The cops are not the white knights that they've been pretending. Here's more evidence of that. You can use that to overcome a presumption in the courts that they're honest before their own system that makes them honest, and you can start becoming that witness that they're just not lawful in what they do, and they can't be presumed to being lawful just because they have a uniform on, a costume. That in fact we see that their costume means they're actually going to break the law for some revenue enhancement. And if you get on the federal side of that, you get Title 18, 241, 245. People go on the highway to create revenue. That's a felony. You get this stuff on them. But get to the point about it. Not only was that cool to watch, that this guy got this, but then it was his reaction to this. I said, well, here we go. Here's the crickets again. For all he wants to do, for all he wants to show people you have a right to have open carry, which I have my problems with that anyway. Why would you even want to? Why do we have to do that? That we have to do that's a problem. But his view of this, his interpretation of what he had happened to him was what I looked at. That he didn't go to the crime, the real crimes against him was a real important problem. With this evidence, he brought his complaint was how they weren't upholding their oaths and how they weren't this and how they weren't that, when in fact what he should have been observing is he had evidence not of just the fact of the collusion and the conspiracy to violate his rights, but that's a felony. See, that's not just not a disagreement on whether they need to go do what, or that they're not doing what they're supposed to do as cops. These are active crimes that he doesn't even recognize he needs to charge against these cops. That I found fascinating. I just looked, I said, well, with all this evidence, this guy's going to be a cricket because he doesn't perceive the real harm that's going on. It's like a social harm he was interested in. And so I just want to bring our attention to that. Even though we have this powerful evidence of the fact of the conspiracy and the crimes that the cops do against us that we all know, now we have objective evidence, not our opinion. And yet the response to that evidence is, oh, they should do better. That's not good enough. That's not going to stop these guys. Taking that and now going after them in the proper way with the proper felony charges and multiple numbers of them So you don't get hit with a vexatious filing concern, which is going to start running. This just started to run through around 10 years ago, and then it backed off, and now it's coming back that the government charges you with vexatious filer. When you have felonies that you're alleging, they can't do that. When they become the protector of the felon, they can't charge you as a vexatious filer. They may try, but then there's no opinion about that. You see clearly what their point is, and they then conspire, and they invoke another federal violation against you, if we go to federal rights, which through the 14th Amendment they are subject to, and at some point you have to admit you're in an open-air prison. As I said last night, it's a concentration camp, actually. That you're going to have better for you. And when you get evidence like this, the cops themselves confessing themselves that they do this, that is a policy consideration that goes to the state itself, that saying that they should have done their job better is just not going to cut it. That to me, crickets. I don't know. Do people understand what I'm saying here? It's not just about catching these people. It's about taking it and persisting with that evidence. This is powerful evidence. I'm not sure how far someone else could use it. I would try to use it, that's for sure. For someone that wasn't party to this, they may have to use multiple pieces of evidence to expose it. But to just know and say, oh, look we got proof that these guys are crooks, and ends there is not enough. That's crickets, folks. And so I've been beating on this thing, this horse for a while, and I hope it's not so dead. I hope something comes around at some point that people realize, even if it's someone else's evidence, you can use it. And if we don't step up to stop it, we may be the next statistic. We may be the next bean counters statistic on how life is going down the tubes. Why? And I asked the question in the UCY chat, because I hear this phrase, it just irritates me, and today it just kind of a thought occurred to me about responding. They always say the powers that shouldn't be. How can you actually say that when you are the one that allows that? They shouldn't. They are, folks, and you allowed it. You can't. It's a divorcement of your own reality to say they shouldn't be there, and just let them continue to be there. And so I've heard this statement. It kind of drives me nuts. All these things seem to start wearing on me thin. And today I heard it again. So somebody that's well listened to, and they say these statements, and it's like, wait a minute. I use the word collectively advisedly. We're collectively required to stop this stuff. It means that if they are, it's not that they shouldn't be, because they are. The obligation and duty is on us. It's a self-inflicted wound, an acceptance of the self-inflicted wound to say that. It's an excuse statement to not take action. So we have evidence that the cops are corrupt, not beyond our opinion. I mean, we all have our own proofs. You all say, well, what am I going to do with that? Well, start doing something. Make their life miserable. They do worry about getting involved in lawsuits, I'll tell you that. They don't want to get that. A certification challenge, a complaint, they don't like that on their record. You don't let the answer go internal to the system. It's kind of looking at this thing with all these riots going on and the protests and things like that. You know, folks, I just looked at finally things take a while to come to me, but then they come fairly clearly. If these were real events, we wouldn't just have riots. We wouldn't be burning down our own towns. We wouldn't be spraying graffiti. And there's a little history about this, which is not solely to the miners, but The miners know very well about when serious things come and affect their lives and truly are affecting their lives. Miners never rioted. They go to war, folks. They don't go out. It's usually they resist the fact of their oppression, and they send in the privateers, first of all, and there's resistance against that. Then they send in the state guard, and the miners go to war. Go read about the Kentucky Coal Wars. It happened in Oregon as well. Miners don't really they wait until the end and then it's finally done and they say, hey, listen, this is over. And you come and resist against them and they'll go to war with you. They don't riot. That these riots are showing, these protests are showing a falsity. And that's the wrong action. As I've been trying to show in this issue, like in the Dakotas, there's just something wrong, completely wrong, and I'm not proven wrong yet. No, I don't know about anybody that would agree with me that would be in on that, but I'm not seeing any evidence that shows that my interpretation of what I see up there is incorrect. And I'll touch a little bit more when I get past into this other thing, that our lives are being torn down and we're allowing it. We act wrong. We get into these so-called movements. We don't press hard before we have to go to the defense mode, and then when they call the guard in on us, we just start burning our town. That's not how that works. When it becomes real, you go to war. I'm not calling for the war. I'm saying as a way to identify what you're witnessing around anymore. These are things to keep the division. If everyone was united about the oppression, we would go to war with it. We wouldn't pussyfoot around with it. So don't think I'm calling for war, all y'all that are half listening. I see some of that in the chats as well. I'm looking at trying to identify what's real. And we have evidences of what's real. And it gets real when it goes real. Disrespecting and insulting yourself by burning all your stuff up is not real. Certainly not mature if we had to move it into that part. Now, granted, and here's the other reality, why I'm not saying let's go to that, because that's the ultimate question. The miners who do that usually take it pretty hard. They lose quite a few people. The point is they make their point. And it, at least temporary, there's always an encroachment later down in history. They get at least the minimums of what they were needing. And then the sadness is that it came to the fact that oppressors would do that required people to defend themselves. But they didn't do it by rioting. They didn't do it by protesting. They pushed the point that needed to be pushed on point. And then when the oppressor decided to do the final oppression, they had to resist. They didn't throw burning tires in the street, well, unless it was a tactic to run cover. They didn't start breaking windows and trash cans. No, you were going to war. You didn't care if the oppressor brought a larger army more capable than you. And so for me, looking out anymore, I see all this stuff, and we get into this entertainment of what the riots are. When it came down to it, in certain instances in history, when the army showed up, let's say the National Guard of the United States, in a real issue, bullets were flying, folks. People died. Points were made despite the loss. And what I see is a bunch of nonsense going on today. And the first problem is we respond wrong in the first place. So we never get to the point that we pressed our point to make our point that we find the oppressor still won't do what's right. Won't do what needs to be done to make it right. They want to do oppression. And I suppose that can lead me into my next tab, which kind of shows us again. Let's start to let's knock that white hat off our head. Let's find out that the armor that we are is a lot bit tarnished, maybe even tattered, if it's there at all. And it's all in this illusionary world. And it's official. America is not the greatest country on earth. It's 28th. I say so-called because this is all, again, propaganda. Even though this is coming off a Zero Hedge. They make another statement here in a moment, which now I see they may be adjusting over. Not that they're the center of the world for news, but even opinion is being really degraded in the last year over what they're bringing to us. The United States of America having all the promise, and listen, they have all there's all the money in the world at the United States of America, and so there's no excuse for what we see anywhere. That's negative. I don't care where you look. There's no reason for any excuse. When they went to stupid money, I told you stupid value is money. I told you that was a proof. We kind of run it down by saying, well, they can spend money on bombing other people, but they can't give Flint or Michigan clean water. Well, then you got to start looking why, and then you look underneath that, and you can see why there's an agenda. In fact, everyone's now commenting on the unqualified one just made a comment that the United States is going to have to get along with the world. It's going to have to lose a little bit of sovereignty. Isn't that what Stephen Harper did in Canada in 2009, 2010? Said the same identical thing. Don't you guys get it? You talk about it, but don't you get it? Get it enough to go do something with it. And whether that's your private protection, you realize the system's going that way until we can stop it. We're going to have some isolation and build that for ourselves, and or addressing where you can these things. It's now by the bean counters, and I don't know how much of this is propaganda. I know 28. That seems a lot high to me, but at any rate, we're 28th. We're not the shining beacon, folks. And it's official. And they talk about possibly why, but why? Violence, alcoholism, obesity. Well, if you listen very carefully, that list happens to correlate with what the WHO, not the rock group, not the OWL, but the WHO, World Health Organization, is looking at in how they run health things through the UN. I found another story being discussed that was talking about the same thing. Special interests will talk in these same subject matter areas, and people don't seem to put this stuff together about where the real source of it is. And we see through Zero Hedge the proof of what I've been saying about where the source is, and they talk to Bloomberg, and remember, he's the gun control fanatic that went out of state to go try and interfere with people's gun rights. And in here, they talk about the report being published using UN's Sustainable Development Goals as guideposts. And so this throws in a whole other analysis that can be done. As I suggest to you that the bottom line is the fiscal bottom line of the globe, and how the bean counter, the global bean counter controllers are going to be controlling you. That's what it's really about. You start seeing ultimately that this so-called health that they are using, as I say, these things are stalking horses for other agendas. They are actually tied to fiscal things. And so you can continue to reduce and find the common denominator that they're utilizing as their guidepost to come after you through subject matters that have different titles. And if the United States was ever near the top, we're sliding down. And that should be a notice to y'all, whether or not you want to think about exceptionalism. Yeah, we're exceptionally stupid, it seems to me, anymore. Exceptionally dumb. Exceptionally non-responsive. And we're sliding. We're sliding against the world. There's some other interesting little things going on in this chart. I don't have time to go through them all. That are things on this flash. I look and see where they say people, where these countries are relative to each other. It's pretty interesting. But the Zero Hedge goes on to quote Bloomberg again. So now we know that they are reporting on this. And what I found interesting about the Zero Hedge is that there's no counter statement explaining these things to people as they read this stuff, which is promoting this as some actual standard that we have to concern ourselves with. And I don't know, really, I mean, it's a standard of some sort, but I can't tell from this where we would even actually be with respect to analyzing how we're doing in our own country. Because it's based on, again, these studies of studies under guideposts that are created by Sustainable Development Guidelines, which you have to understand that has fraud built into it. And I'm gonna get to that here today. Here's an additional note by Bloomberg, which kind of focuses, I think, the point. That shows you the standards that are being used against us in this country as well to keep telling us things are going on. Now, Bloomberg notes the U.S. scores its highest marks in water, sanitation, and child development. Now remember, this is a UN report. Now I want you to think Flint, Michigan, and the increasing numbers I told you of cities that you'd find out, actually municipalities that have poisoned water, toxic water that they're not telling you about. And understand what Bloomberg is saying here actually when they say that our highest scores here are for our water and child development. Their interest is to develop children cannot be a good thing in your mind to hear. Remember, the child is the ward of the state, okay? I go through all this stuff. They're developing that ward of the state for what, folks? But to know the future that we want. Not us, the people, but the UN, goal guidepost setters. The United States score, and think about it, Flint, Michigan, and CORE, the education, and child services, the crime that's against little ones. That's our highest scores. Again, as we look at this information, you go, well, just invert what you're being told if you have the ability to keep that track, and then look at it through the dimensional hit. We're being taken hits on all levels in all subject matters. The highest marks are in water, sanitation. Ask the people in Flint, Michigan about our highest levels in sanitation. If that's our highest sanitation, if we have high marks for that, folks, can you tell how much trouble we're really in? That should be the definition right there. It actually tells you the fraudulent nature of this report, but notwithstanding. Then they go on to say this very interesting thing, which is prime to Bloomberg and his and the UN agenda and the Bar Association as well agenda to tie a knot in the barrel of your Second Amendment right. They claim that the United States has highest marks in water, sanitation, and child development. Remember, see, all this stuff ties together. I wish I could just give you what I know. Then benchmarks come in, and state benchmarks for education, and one of the themes, and I haven't found the recent one. They keep moving this thing around. It's the highest yield. They're developing your child. You, as a parent, you're the custodian of the state's ward. They're developing the yield to the highest investment to the state to include higher workforce productivity. In an environment that they are replacing productivity with more robots to produce and taking away actual productivity. Remember the definition of A2030 underneath. I didn't mean to go to the UN so much today, but here we are now. As I keep looking at this, again, it just develops and develops and develops. When I read these stories, there's a whole flash, the whole world flashes before my mind of what there is. What we're being shown if we actually had the eyes to see and the ears to hear. The next statement is that the upside is the high water quality and sanitation. And I have to say, generally in lots of places we have decent enough water. It makes us keep going. But the truth of the big municipalities is that otherwise. Highest marks are in water, sanitation, and the fact that they can indoctrinate your little ones. And then, unsurprisingly, Bloomberg reports, interpersonal violence takes a heavy toll on America's overall ranking. What they call interpersonal violence has to do with gun crime. And so you see that it built into this statement, this whole statement runs UN agenda propaganda. Whatever the actual fact of our standard of living in the United States, And you just look around and you should be able to see what's going on. And that's all fabricated as well. We've been silent on all of that. The actual big story here is gun crime, imputing to your mind that we need to control guns. And that's not even my point to speak here. I'm just pointing out this is the UN agenda. We talk about the reality of this. We find out that, now let's jump into this UN thing a little bit about controlling guns to the point. Let's go to the most important, the most gun-controlled place, if I understand this correctly, and see what happens there. Now remember, you got to think about this report that I'm reading from as an inversion. That what brings America down is this heavy toll on that, is this interpersonal violence, thinking gun crime. But remember, be careful about the social dynamic of that gun crime is, when they say Black Lives Matter, well, the Black lives are killing each other. And so even the black people apparently don't think Black Lives Matter. And we see that then in a movement that doesn't really do much, and we're back to what's reality. When's it become really real is not through this movement, because it comes down, if you look very carefully, stop putting any color in front of it. The answer is no lives matter. You're in an undead condition. No lives matter. And if you think different, just go talk to a cop and piss him off. Gun crime we get a beating in America because we have gun crime. Well, let's go to the place that has the biggest gun control, because this is what the UN status is. And weeks ago, heck, it's been over a month now. See how long it takes me to get to these stories? But it ties in, so I just go ahead and I wait. Some of this stuff, it just goes on, but it's all relevant. It all ends up tying together because it's all tying together. It's notice to us. It's not news. The craziest chart you will see today, I'm looking at it a month later, it's still the craziest chart I'm looking at. And they say, this is also from Zero Hedge, context is king. Statista details, 500 people were murdered in Chicago this year, more than Los Angeles and New York combined. So taking the Bloomberg lead that United States' living standard is taking a heavy toll because of interpersonal crime, notwithstanding the social problem in that. You go to the place where the UN agenda would be, all the agendaites would be applauding, and we see the worst interpersonal crime. From the same website, Zero Hedge. But that's not the story about having more crime than states in the government, states in the United States. The actual chart that you're looking at when they finally show it to you is the rate as compared to the homicides in Chicago as compared to the American war dead in Iraq and Afghanistan since 2001. The rate in Chicago exceeds the war in the most gun-controlled city in the country, as I understand it. And I don't mean any disrespect to talk about the American war dead in Iraq and Afghanistan. Please do not forget about the innocent people because of the neoconistas, the buffoons in government, the people who have the psychopaths in Washington, of all the innocent people that have died around those that were killed in the American war dead. There's no gun control there, it seems. In fact, they've got people over there that got all kinds of armament. They're still dying when a major force goes in to kill you, which should be food for thought about what goes down when it gets real, folks. You know, these poofy places like Charlotte and Baltimore and all this nonsense. More people are killed in Chicago than the American war dead in the war, folks. Should tell you something about UN gun control, at least, and what this story about our standard of living is. and how everything is so inverted, and the big lie and inversion that even, any propagandist publication now is coming out with their version of advancing sustainable development. The global issue, I find this very fascinating too. This all comes together when this unqualified one went before the world to say the United States has to lose its sovereignty. Just like Stephen Harper did in 2009 and 2010. And where did he say that, folks? But at the G8 statements, the events, financial. So all this is coming down, and we're still seeing the presentation of a foreign imposition, a foreign law within this country. They call it soft law because they can't actually make it law. They're getting very close to overcome that, though. But they're utilizing the administrative side, the executive side of this to pull this off. And we have the evidence before us if anybody wanted to take it and to actually address these criminals, these treason, these people committing treason to our own people. It's right here, right for us to see. Let's go international a little bit. And I saw this as, this is not crickets, this is the way you handle it. Just say no, right? Bolivia ended its drug war by kicking out the DEA and legalizing coca. And so we see the war on drugs, the fraud, causes us harm. It's what you see actually is what's also fueling this thing in the United States. Some of what so-called interpersonal drug crime, gun crime, is these drug battles, these gangs that set up to protect their turf and their business. It's illegal as it might be. But what I found also, so here, just say no. If we just said no, folks, the Bolivians are smarter than the United States people in the United States. Just say no. Figure out how to make that effective. They weren't crickets. They took a stand. They kicked out the DEA. And now they did what? They did the same thing they're doing to marijuana, to coca, not cocaine. They legalized it. Now they get tax money. And so I said Dr. Bronner's came through on a Twitter feed, and they said they're pulling out of one of the organic companies or something. I can't remember all the story because they found out there's a deception in that, and they're going to go privately fund support for marijuana laws to allow it. And I asked them, does that mean you're going to focus your money on decriminalizing, or are you going to agree with the theft by legalizing it? Now, I haven't got an answer on that, and nobody favorited that question. So whether or not anybody truly understood it or whether or not everyone got upset, I don't know. But here's a just say no. They kicked out. What they did is legalize coca, the plant, and now people can live and do things without risk that they were doing for millennia, millennia. Because they understand these plants have medicinal or just regular effects that they need. In this case, they can drink the tea or they chew the leaf, a big old thick wad of the leaf, and it gives them some energy. It's not the concentrated form of a chemical. And so right in this story, we also have evidence that even the people historically have used it for a medicinal capacity, which would allow anybody who wants to get on the proper bandwagon, not legalizing marijuana, cannabis, however the word works. They're going to regulate any of it just to get the money, and they'll beat you down for the distinction, and make sure they get their money, make sure they get their control, their ability to come and take your properties when you didn't quite do it just right. But here's evidence out of Bolivia of coca, the plant. And my thought is, well, okay, marijuana, coca, how about if we pull it all together? We say that the DEA and the FFA, the alphabet agencies, whoever you come up with, are all absolutely wrong about their Schedule 1 conditions where they include that authority to constrict a plant. And we start producing these facts where they say there's no medical benefit. Argue with the 3-4 millennia of peoples using it in different countries. Is the expose of the pharma influence on the government and not doing their benefit for the people, but for the undead. And I found this, the DEA is kicked out. They just say, no more drug war, folks. So it seemed to me in this list of where the United States is going down, we got to stop these wars that we commit, the United States declares. And one of them against us is the war, the war on drugs. It's like no different than the war of terror. That has to be stopped. We have to do that. So you want to stop a problem? It looked like when you read the story, these people it turned into what you find out happening in marijuana. You just let them grow. The market drops out, but there's lots of Mother Nature's great, just produces all kinds of green stuff. And we're all still happy, and the government gets its so-called money, and everyone seems to be doing well, and the whole system of corruption in the judicial system doesn't even have to be touched. That was a big ouch for the Bar Association, wasn't it? Maybe you think that's where the resistance was coming from a little bit, since they're the ones that make the law and are sitting in the seats of decision, the legislatures that led this thing through. And it's just your mass force that just gets it to push the right way, even though it really shouldn't have taken all that energy. But the compromise was you legalize instead of decriminalize, isn't it? But this little report here was kind of neat. Just say no. Just kick them out. Why aren't we intelligent enough in the United States to start doing this, where we also have the obligation and duty to, for as many people that listen to me would just say, I backed out, I don't get engaged. Find a place to engage is what I'm asking. You may not be. See, I don't go out and get in the cop's face to make a point. The point is I'm still effective, and I find other ways and so do the people that work with me, we find other ways to become effective that don't require that we get into the places that would be dangerous or cause some kind of a reproachment for what we do. This is not, again, when it gets real, there's no excuses. You just don't start burning garbage cans and breaking windows when someone invades your land. And I've been working really hard to make this memorializing our function as people as peaceful as possible by bringing these principles out that have been working, so we are better when we get to the point that we don't have to break windows and burn trash cans and tires. So they've legalized coca down in Bolivia. Things went chill. People are now able to grow it. They get a little bit of funds. It's just somebody producing a need that they understand millennially, they don't have millennials down there. They have people. They don't worry about these tagline people, generations of people. For millennia, they have used this plant for medicinal purposes. Should be an evidence to you to bring forward, compile. When you make a comment to a place, even though you don't think it's working, it does work if you keep it, you can understand the process, where you can stop watching the destruction of our country. And the reason why it continues is because not enough of us step in and do even the most simplest thing, as I'm always reminded, but even a pebble makes a ripple in the ocean. And I have to say, that's about where I'm at a lot of times. I'm just that pebble, that grain of sand. Is it even that big that I make in the ocean, it seems at times. And yet, I know there's a lot of people that listen to me nonetheless. But again, it's not just listening, it's doing. It's a big chasm difference that I can see. Not to judge, not to get on you. I'm on you about this all the time, but it's just it really is it makes the difference. Knowing a thing is not doing a thing. And then doing a thing that's wrong is not the thing you should do, is not doing a thing. The thing you ought to do. And there's a big chasm of knowledge about that as well. And again, I can't appreciate Vince easily more about his taking the bull by the horns. He's really doing what he can. He's bringing his contribution. He's got his broadcast feedback. We don't talk much. I can only hear I can't leave. In fact, I turned on the broadcast. I got halfway through. It came on. I remembered. I turned it on, and I had to walk out. I had to go talk with someone. Shows up, wants some information. So I didn't really get to hear all of it. I heard a little bit. But that's, again, just somebody taking the learning process and starting to learn how it gets applied, try to work with it, is what has to be done. And so there's an example for you all, folks. I mean, just a big difference. It's a lot different for me. I'm not judging whether he's right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just that he's doing it. That he refers to my work a lot is humbling, but in a way, hearing my words back, sometimes I tell you how some of this stuff comes out of me, folks. It's not planned. And I'm thinking that he's talking. I said, did I even say that? I don't remember saying this stuff. I don't really think about it. It's not something I plan. It's something I respond with. And being under his scrutiny. I know he's missing some things, but his scrutiny is still kind of humbling. Will I actually come out okay? I think I will. And there's someone there checking me out like I tell you to do when you're going to make your own journey. I've not asked him to do that. So that's an example for us. He's slowly picking stuff up. He's working it out. Actually, Vince, I know you're probably listening, if you would take those notes the poetic plagiarist that you do, it almost sounds like you're singing a song sometimes about talking about things. Take those notes that are important to you. I'd like to hear what you think about small batches of those notes that you take. I'd like to hear your input with what you've thought about those notes that were important enough to take down. And I'm not asking about an idle thing here for you. I don't want to just hear you work over my stuff. I'd like to hear what you are making, what sense it's making for you in practice. And I'm asking all of you that just heard that, you have to do the same thing if you really, whatever you think of me or what I'm saying, or whether you're ever going to do anything, this is really, I'm finding you have to do this kind of an analysis anyway. Just taking stuff in without a contribution literally wastes time, doesn't do anything with it, and ineffectual. And at that point, I would call that more entertainment, no matter what the bottom line is. So Bolivia knows what to do. Just say no. We have the obligation, as those people did, to stop a harm for them. We have to say no. The DA is a bad condition. That's the war on drugs. Let's stop that, folks. Let's say no here. Figure out a way to do it. Part of the partial compromise going on is this legalization of these things, or the Schedule 1ing of certain things, so that they'll have to be legalized in the future. You don't even see that thing coming down. See, as many things as they put on Schedule 1, they're going to prepare for tax in the future, as people come around to figuring out what really shouldn't be in their world, that is making cause to have worse things in their world, like this coca becomes cocaine, becomes a war on drugs. The CIA gets money from it. The government's the main supplier, and we keep thinking they're doing something for us. Interpersonal violation goes on. The UN has a policy against interpersonal violation. That lowers our living, and so let's put a knot in your gun. Am I the only one that sees these They talk about interconnectedness at the UN. Am I the only one that really sees this? Now, I hear people talking in little disparate parts, but does anybody actually see how this starts to really work? In a way, it's scary to me that I appear to be one of the few. And so let's move back on. I didn't want to really respond to this, but I am. To me, it's object lessons, whether or not you agree with me or find fault in what I'm saying or anything. To me, I'm kind of beyond all that. I'm working a methodology. I'm working a wisdom and experience. I'm working something I don't see many people doing that seems to give much fruit for my efforts, for as slow and a small amount as they each might be, the pebbles and grains of sand in the ocean they seem. But I'm going to return again here quickly to this Dakota pipeline thing. Again, I don't know what else to tell you, folks. I mean, it's just writing on the wall. To me, it's maybe the writing on the fog of a bathroom mirror. I'm the only one that can see it. In the moment that the fog's on the mirror, when I walk out, no one else can see it. I can tell you I saw it, and then you just think I'm, maybe he's whistling Dixie, I guess. I explained the stalking horse issue on this. I explained the false front. I explained how this is just not quite right. This doesn't even fulfill the needs of the Indians up there. In fact, there's an underlying thing. I don't like to even sound insultive much at all. But you also know I don't believe that there's really, yes, I know there's color. We're all sienna, except for the blue people. We are different as peoples. I'm not blind all that way, but we're just people. There's a part of this that's just people. We all have the same things, the same 7 sins in us. There's no nobility anywhere in any of that. We all respond the same way, and we do that so methodically that they made a protocol about that. And then my view of the system analysis of what's going on, and I don't know if I can even I don't even know how small the slice is I see. I see it, what looks pretty wide, but when you see going that as wide as it looks, I don't know how brilliant these evil geniuses really are to make it way beyond. So I'm always humbled by my narrowness, even on my blinders that I'm trying to pull off. But when you can predict this stuff ahead of time, it's not even, and get resistance from people generally, and almost sensing a passive aggression of arrogance against these, what seem to me, fairly clear problems, and then disregard the really most important problems, that itself becomes the stalking horse. I just have to start shaking my head. This story, U.S. Army welcomes Dakota Access protesters to stay indefinitely, was sent to me. Well, no, I think this was on Twitter. I had another one. So another listener sent something else to bring up another aspect. But here it was, folks. I mean, I don't know what anybody else saw this or what they read out of it, but U.S. Army welcomes Dakota Access protesters to stay indefinitely. They had to be welcomed was the first thing I saw, but secondly, they did it contrary to that court order, didn't they? So United States government, its own executive function, dismisses and disrespects and dishonors their own judiciary, first of all. I'm not going to go through all that stuff again. You want to hear that, go in the Pastcast. Go on the blogcaster at reallibertymedia.com. Just there. I'm still not believing, I haven't found anybody to say that I've incorrectly viewed these things. On what limited things I look at seem to hold water pretty well. This report's coming to tell us the news is coming thick and fast as the protests over the Dakota Access Pipeline heat up. In the latest developments, a federal court of appeals ruled that it will take more time to consider a request for an emergency injunction against the pipeline from the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. Meanwhile, last Friday, the United States Army Corps of Engineers set the stage for protests to continue indefinitely by issuing a special use permit for protesters to legally occupy federal land in Lake Oahe. Did I say it right better that time instead of the other times last week I may have said it wrong? And then the propaganda piece. While all this is unfolding, as I told you, right on cue, a new pipeline spill in Alabama has provided Dakota Access protesters the vivid demonstration of the risks and hazard posed by oil pipelines near sensitive lands. No propaganda here. You didn't see any of that in the facts. What are they? Sensitive lands to where, folks? See, no one says it's definite places. And then I don't see the evidence that anybody actually took those places that's so important as to make them considered sensitive lands and bring to the record the things that needed to be said. As I said last week, don't come to me with your objection of me when you haven't put together the record that was needed to protect those things you thought were so darn important. This is a fact now. I was asking, are these people trespassing? The very fact of this statement that they were issued a special use permit after shows that last week they were trespassing. It also shows that the Army Corps of Engineers has jurisdiction, not Indian land, which is the Open 7 says it's not a secret, but it wasn't an open disclosure. Changes the whole world in my mind. But here was the punchline. As we saw why. I told you why the government came out as the stalking horse principle behind that can't be harmed, to press, counter to what the judge said, the agenda that's been sitting underneath the skin that the Earth Justice bar members were saying they were pushing. Which I was saying is contrary ultimately to what the stated objectives of the Indians are. The Army, U.S. Army, the Army Corps of Engineers, the Army, don't miss this one, folks, the Army Corps of Engineers, in this military construct, I tell you, we live in, was instrumental in passing the Dakota Access Project through the permitting process, but that doesn't necessarily make it a member of the fossil fuel fan club. In fact, the USACE has been front and center in the Defense Department's clean energy transition. And I think, since I'm running out of time already, because I've got so much more important things to speak of, if you didn't understand that the Earth Justice people were arguing supposedly for the Indians, were actually promoting the Defense Department, the Defense Department, folks, military in your life. This is global and local all at the same time. Then you aren't listening and paying attention. They are putting this absolutely in the context I said they were going to and why. And as an example, they say, take a look at the recent USACE ruling against a new coal terminal in Washington State, and you'll also see a federal agency that is beginning to leverage tribal concerns and treaty rights in order to fulfill an environmental stewardship mission. If that wasn't a UN mouthful, and I told you about leveraging, and treaty rights weren't even part of it, but they're folding this in. That was what I was saying. That this was the scam the whole time. It's something I fight all the time. I think the right way, because wherever we do what we do, none of this nonsense actually goes into plan. It doesn't go into fact. And we don't go to the court, and we don't give all these protests, and we still stop this stuff. This sustainable development is a treason against you that the military is imposing. Should concern you a lot. I predicted this was the bottom line of this, and this turns out to be this report this week. This is extrajudicial now, you see. It all comes together at some point. This one come pretty quick, actually. And I won't read any more because I want to get on to some other thing. Let's highlight this. Leveraging tribal concerns for environmental stewardship. This word is critical. Steward and stewardship. To identify the source, the felony, the crime against us. But let's look at those tribal concerns, and we'll find out there's no nobility behind these tribes and their claim, not any more than anybody else. They're all people too. They have the same weaknesses, the same foibles, the same problems, and it turns out to be the same abilities to create the same levels of hypocrisy. And to be used by others to leverage that hypocrisy. From a listener, thank you very much. Again, I wasn't studying this. You guys help sometimes on bringing stuff that just kind of lines this all up. And the question here was this hypocrisy and the fracturedness. This is an Indian cultural thing, and yet you look at what the Indians are, they don't really know what they want, actually. They know what they want in parts, but it's not consistent. While North Dakota embraces the oil boom, tribal members ask environmental questions, was the title of this report. Fascinating, folks. Where's the consistency if your whole issue was supposed to be cultural? And then we find out that really isn't the point, to prove the Earth Justice attorneys were pushing the agenda counter to any cultural concerns. You leveraging them in order to gain favor and support. 5 years ago, through their sprawling Fort Berthold Indian reservation was a sleepy landscape, isolated ranches, and a history of wrenching displacements. But since hydraulic fracking technology ignited North Dakota's oil rush, Halliburton and other oil field giants have zeroed in on tribal land. The terrible corporations. Folks, they're the only people that have the money to do this stuff, and that's the truth of that. I don't like them any better than you for different reasons, and maybe the same reasons, but the point is that this is how this works. You have a modern, so-called modern society. I don't know the answer to that yet. I don't have that answer. And it is that we're all being drug along. We're all suffering the same. We all live on the res, folks. It's just the way that works. And we're doing it on our own demand, remember? But go on to the report here. The numbers are staggering. More than $500 million in fracking leases and oil royalties have poured into the MHA Nation, 3 affiliated tribes that share a reservation here. Its 930,000 acres sit atop billions of barrels of oil tucked deep in the shale below. Tribal leaders are building a new refinery, the nation's first in decades, near Newtown. Now, I'm not going to get all the intricacies of culture, the Indian, all that, all that stuff, folks. The Indian people suffer terribly. That's what's being missed here, I suppose, in all this. But right here we have a ton of money that's available that the Indians are going to take benefit of. Now, I've been wondering about their mineral rights. Through this report, they don't tell me how, but I'm going to accept that they have the mineral rights, and I'm going to accept them through the provision that I noticed that was in the Laramie Treaty, which, whether or not the Laramie Treaty is relevant here, there's a function in the Laramie Treaty that allowed the Indians that became farmers to become citizens of the United States such that they could own the mineral underneath their farms and the land that way, that they could become like everybody else in that ability. So I said there was an interesting walkout clause, if you will, to gain the same things beyond reservation, right in the reservation. That I'm going to go ahead and say through that mechanism, whether it doesn't matter, just to give them, just to agree they've got they have the mineral estate. That was very important. Otherwise, I don't know to say how they're getting this money. But here they are receiving the money for doing this on their land that they have the right to withhold consent for the leases. If grandmother was so darned important. That within the Indian tribes all over, there is a lot of misunderstanding, misinterpretation, lack of communication, or just different interests. Tribal leaders, did you hear that, folks? Tribal leaders are building a new refinery, the nation's first in decades. Well, how do they think that stuff is coming out of the refinery, but through a pipeline, folks? Now, when I keep hearing, it rings in my mind, Earth Justice is like the Department of Defense. It's leveraging tribal concerns, not for the Indian, but for their agenda. It brings this starkly home. They need a pipeline, they need infrastructure, they need trucks to build the refinery that they're buying into, that apparently Grandmother Earth is not such harmed. And they actually make a comment, it's like a spell and the money is too strong, was an observation. I agree. It is a strong pull, but they fell for that. There's no more nobility in the question now. Where'd the nobility go? It's in the next question to take the buck. I'm not putting any judgment on it. I said this is the actions that are going on. On one hand, we got people fighting and hurting and getting arrested and then violating laws and violating what they needed to do if they had the standing. And on the other side, they're taking benefit from it. It's not a very good consistency in my mind to support. All told, North Dakota recorded 300 pipeline spills the past 2 years, many minor without alerting the public. And here was the standard, folks. So we have 300 pipelines that have spills. Like we said, they're contained. There's really no overt, yes, we don't like it on the ground, but we fix it up just enough to keep the rest of society going. And the Indians are integral with doing that. They're supplying this for people. So much so they're going to make a refinery. Folks, do you know the value of a refinery to do that in a long extension of time that's going to go on? Apparently they're not concerned about the water, are they? I'm torn between what we do and what we shouldn't do, but that's not what my discussion is here. We're being duped, and it's facial dupeness. And we ignore it, and we cause division amongst ourselves, and we got to really stop that. So the state's position was, which I was saying you need to speak to when you communicate in these arenas, quote, our philosophy has always been, if there's no threat to groundwater, surface water, public health, and environment, we didn't feel the public was threatened and needed a news release to know about it, said Dennis Fewless, Water Quality Director for North Dakota Health Department. You have to bring the proof within the police power concern that these people will respond to. If you don't, I don't know what more to tell you. That was the state standard. That has not yet been met to my knowledge. It may have been. It hasn't been news, has it? Tribal leaders. Let's go to what the tribe. What's the culture say here? Tribal leaders. Understanding there's a corporate problem as well, folks. See, there's a big problem. Big hypocrisy on keeping unity in the culture already, just blown apart. My position is that's really defeating the real problems that Indians truly have at hand. But maybe not so much here, because we start to see a little bit of the problem that's not so much a problem, that they agree. We'll dig into grandmother's oil pockets a little bit. Tribal leaders insist all this energy development can make them self-sufficient again. This is a rationale, isn't it? Not culture, but it's a rationale, and they're moving with it. Kind of blows that whole other thing completely out. I'm not judging that it was right or wrong. I'm saying this is just not a consistency that we have to be causing trouble around. We've got to get this thing fixed if it's truly the problem that one side says of the other. Even as tribal lands contribute a sizable chunk of North Dakota's oil production, even as tribal lands contribute a sizable chunk of North Dakota's oil production, some estimates call for another 2,000 new wells on the reservation, giving its tribal leaders unprecedented clout as oil companies jockey for leases. So here's the point. The oil companies are jockeying for leases because of the tribal leaders making decisions. It's not the corporations looking to benefit from something that they're trained to do and sitting in there to do. The tribal leaders have decided this is okay. After a decade of stalled talks, the tribe's Thunder Butte refinery is inching closer to reality. The $300 million project would be the first built in Indian country and the first new one in the United States since the 1970s. A groundbreaking ceremony was held and the Environmental Protection Agency issued a permit in July. Do you hear all the incongruities and all that, folks? $300 million in a refinery that another group of Indians says is the product of harming the earth and our culture. I'm not getting on the Indians. I'd say you better get consistent because this is the same divisions they throw on everybody. We're all in on this, folks. This is my frustration. These are all stalking horse issues to me. They're all excuses for going after what needs to be done. The Indians have decided they're going to build a refinery. It's the Indians building the refinery. No other industry in the United States has done so, folks. The EPA agrees. These are the same criminals that say your carbon dioxide is poison. Oh, but they issued a permit to do an illegal act, didn't they? Do you hear the truth here? Do you hear the inconsistencies, the hypocrisy? Tribal Chairman Tex Hall, who declined numerous interview requests, has promised a grand plan that would include petroleum pumping, refining, storage, shipping, and truck stop hotel and fleet of tribal-owned trucks running on natural gas captured on the reserve. Why? Because there's no pipelines They are blowing this natural gas, they're venting it. 30% of the capacity is going into the air as flame. If you didn't understand how dirty this really is to the environment, and how hypocritic all this nonsense is, that I'm watching the real agenda play out in front of us and we're all being destroyed. I don't understand how intelligent we can be to be able to be thinking we're so intelligent that we're not addressing the real issue. And here's one of the bottom lines. I don't besmirch these people at all. You got a mineral right, you can exploit it, but don't be talking, grabbing the money on one hand, show me the money and grabbing it, and then go claiming it's violating some cultural basis. Oh, and then we're going to poison the earth. Sanders, one of the people in the story, too, receives monthly oil checks, as I would expect any mineral entryman to expect when they develop their mineral. Sanders says, I won't lie, it's nice to get the money every month. But when you think what we're losing to get that money, you wonder if it's worth it. Well, there it is. Wonder away. Go ahead and act before you thought. That's not my decision to make. I might not do any different than you did. It's not the point. When I see this, that they're going to build refineries, they're going to need trucks on the road, what do you think that, what's that going to do? What infrastructure and the highways that are made where? Utilizing more petroleum. And then to hear this thing that goes off that they're being leveraged by the Department of the Indians are being used by the Department of Defense and Earth Justice in order to put this other agenda on us, which is going to check all this. And what it's going to do is put all this under carbon tax. Do you understand the tribal tax that'll be in the world against them once they start putting more carbon dioxide type materials into the environment? Has anybody thought far enough ahead on that? The carbon tax liability here? And it's focused in on the Indians to do? Maybe why no other industry has? And the EPA gives its thumbs up? Am I the only one that sees this, folks? I mean, everyone sees these things, these little problems, but are you seeing it in an integrated plan of attack against you? And then I hear, again, the other problem, no alternatives, which drives me nuts a little bit. I think I would have thought long since now there would have been alternatives, and I don't want to hear the excuses they wouldn't come out. In the internet right now, things can come out, they come out anyway. Now I'm reminded about, am I the only one that sees this? I made the reference before, even as a cliche. I'm not going to get into the authenticity of this or whatever, but even another example came out, which kind of made me chuckle a little bit. And I don't even know how this stuff comes to me to go look, but here it was, little statement I wanted to move on from. In The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Douglas Adams, 1979, The Inhabitants of Cricket, spelled with K's. Remember that the blogcaster I had all a bunch of K, everything I said was without a K, I put it on there. Inhabitants of Cricket, having always lived in a giant dust cloud, had no concept of the universe until a spaceship fell out of the sky. How could they not know about something as obvious as the universe? Folklore, based on Columbus's voyage to the New World and on the journals of other world explorers, suggests that native people did not see the giant sailing ships until the men were on shore. The concept of ships not seen suggests the ships were so ridiculously out of context that their mind ignored it. The same with the cricketer's universe. Folks, am I a shaman, folks? That I see things that most people don't put together? That I tell all of us Indians, hey, there's ships in the harbor, and everyone looks out and can't see? Do I say things that are just unknowable at some level to our awareness, that are so weird that you just don't want to pay attention? You got other things your mind starts to do. As if I am that shaman, just not that I tremble to take the title. But Let's think of it as a thought idea. I'm standing on the shore. I see the ships. I tell y'all, here come the ships. You go, what ships? Well, I don't see no ships. As a shaman, I see the future. Now, looking at this story as an object lesson, as a shaman, knowing the future, and then knowing the future as the past. Do I just keep quiet again after telling you and you ignoring? Or do I expect you to become shamans for yourself fast enough that you see the ships and understand the potential danger and how to better deal with that, if possible? Do I stand back as a shaman and be quiet after I've told you the ships are in the harbor? Or on the horizon, I guess, would be the better place. Or do I, as the shaman, see the future from the past from the future and insist, as I have, that you all become your own shaman to see the unseen, hear the unheard? Has really been a perplexing thing to me, actually. Not until I started to talk in this way, when I referenced the Indian condition, the story that we're told about the ships, that I'm truly appreciating in the last few weeks what the shaman was witnessing. And I can see, if you see the future, I can see the despair, the sadness in his heart, which can get to me a bit when I think about it too deeply, which just makes me want to keep pushing. That I think another answer is, I expect you all to be the shaman in your own life, if you will, if I can go there, if you understand that. And at some point I resent, and truly getting to the point I resent these people that speak about other things, that would support the protesters in their trespass, that wouldn't do things that they ought to do, that sit in a cultural quagmire of their own, that would say that because maybe my observation is different, that I don't have the awareness. I'm beginning to take that on as an insult. It totally disregards my experience, my walking on the land, my living with the land and learning with the land, and having it instruct me certain things. And who is anybody taking on this costume of cultural nobility to deny me my experience that was all, and at least, if not more, awareness, that brings me to tell you every week what I see, what I do, and hope, beyond hopes, we get mobilized to do something about it. And as I look up to do the very next thing, this next thing is quite a work. And so, I'm going to adjust. I'm going to want you to remember something here, folks, because I can't do it today. This next thing is I think it's going to take over 45 minutes, an hour. Probably 2 hours by the time I get done. Something I've been wanting to actually get to, two things, very important. One's a methodological issue, and I want you to remember the word steward. All right? And I want you to remember stalking horse, and I'm going to tie it to another word for you called stakeholder. And we're going to see this felonious, treasonous imposition of environment. It's not the real environment. It's not the one that taught me in the forest, folks. I lived in the forest for 7 years, I told you. It took me a while, maybe a couple years, to actually start living in the forest, living with the forest. It was surprising how resistant you're getting into habits. You got to break lots of things. And they slowly wear out and break down. That was kind of neat. But in the process of that time, I've seen things, done things, and come to awarenesses, things that are not necessarily applicable right now, but they are there. They're with us every day. To see what real environment is versus the imposed one. That I'm realizing I don't have enough time to do this next thing, and it'll be more a technical idea. You really have to put your mind to it. It'll give you the tools of how I see, how I can tell you the crime against us, in part. It's in a narrow area of what I do. But this work is going to be a reading of many pages that explains a whole lot. It's what I would call, euphemistically, the guru manual on how they do it to you. So I want to point out this thing called steward, and tied to stalking horse, tied to stakeholder. But right now I'm going to run out of time this broadcast. I got plenty of time here to talk on things, but not for this subject matter. I wanted to tie it into the word steward I told you earlier, because that was another key. And the reason why this word steward comes up, because in this guru training manual on how you take people down by incorporating a crime and making it normal, the word steward comes up once. And yet it becomes a tie to lots of other documents. I've actually talked to some in the past. That to see this, it's, I don't even know what to call this thing. It's a construction, a fraudulent construction that validates them, the criminals, that is being imposed in the protests at the pipeline and anywhere there's a you can see these things. You can see where there's an underlying agenda moving forward. I can tell you this is part of what's going on. I think, and I'm going to take some time on this. If you can see what they've done in these next pages I'll discuss in the next broadcast, you'll be able to understand more what I see standing on the shore as the ships on the horizon. And it's really broken down. I'll just give it to you simply. When someone comes with an authority to bring their purpose, and they don't really have a right to bring it, it's a crime against you. And I'm going to show you how they've created this, what they call the stakeholder, which can be another stockholder, which can be a stalking horse, which are those that steward, but without right. So I needed to connect that to you, because we're going to have to come back to this idea and the connection of why I moved from the pipeline to that. And all this information's come out, like this information come to me about a month ago. Ran across it on something else, doing some study, and I put some type words that were in my mind. I just put my words in a search engine that were in my mind. I had to get them out. I wanted to research the subject matter, and this one document pops up. Becomes very valuable in the study of what I'm doing. So remember those things. The steward, tied to leveraging a cause of people, to a stalking horse that is this thing called stakeholder. If you'll take that note and carry that with you till next week. And I apologize for not being able to manage the time better to get to that today. But as important, and I mean, as I look at this, and not to diminish the Indian plight or the plight of anyone. See, we're all in the same hold of the ship of the state here. And it's a nasty, dirty, messed up hold. There's things going on that I think are more important. When I look at the fact that this was a game that we're being played, that's probably why my intuition said don't get involved with the pipeline until I started seeing people take what I consider, and I think I've proven the wrong path, if what they were doing was what they stated they wanted to do was what they really were going to do. Versus what I see is that they get sucked into a cause that's set up for them. In other words, that Silo Weapons Quiet Wars, we set a place for you, you plug yourself in. And we use your energy, your things, your statements against you, and you don't even know it. But we use it for our purpose, the future we want. Not the future the Indians want. And we see now the Indians have a question, and that's a fair question, but not to support a cause elsewhere. Something I think is even more, and I don't know if we're too late on this. Even so, I'm asking y'all to, I just don't have the time, folks. It's so easy to do this stuff, I just don't have the time. Why I'm hoping, even though I mentioned it twice, that somebody has been sending letters to the Department of Health and Human Services Department about this communicable diseases rule that they're making. Now, I first saw it and didn't appreciate it from Gary L. A month ago. The story that he wrote on his blogger, Gary L. and Gigi's Boo WordPress, control of communicable diseases, a proposed rule by the Health and Human Services Department, 8/15. I don't know if they only gave 30 days on that, folks. We may be out of the period No, I'm sorry. I'm just reading his article now as I go through. It's a 2-month period. We still have time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gary. Again, I just don't have the time to dive into this stuff. We need people to hit this one. This is so serious. I mean, it pales about everything else. It's like the NDAA. It's the police power health arm of the NDAA in action here, folks. I can't tell you how detrimental this rule will be. In fact, as I was talking about it then, some movies, I can't remember now what they were called. Darn it, it just flashed from my mind. There was movies similarly made about a health issue that the government comes in and declares everyone in town to be a vector, and ultimately attempts or does destroy the town. Maybe Impact might be one. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm not much on movies. They're there to tell us the future, I'm noticing, but I came to that too late, so I'm on to other things. But you all can find that stuff. That this is that. This rule is that. We have 30 days left, or less than 30 days. We have less than that left now, but we can send a message, folks. I would ask you all simply, and you'll get the links in the blogcaster, to send at least a letter saying you need more time, because I don't know what else to tell you, because I haven't really been able to read this. You'll find, I'm sure, I've read a little bit. Gary L. does a job putting this out. I didn't appreciate by what he was saying how dire this thing is that they're putting and pulling on us as an administrative rule to be able to declare unilaterally you will be put someplace indefinitely without any due process, just like NDAA, but it's attaching a health imperative, which is one more layer difficult to convince other people that you've been wrongly stolen. And this is even if you don't have what they said, they are quarantining people for. You don't even have to be sick. And so the administrative process allows a comment period. This is what I've been talking about, the pipeline and all this other stuff. Write a simple letter, get on the internet, go to the blogcaster, find the documents, read some of it. Look at some things that don't make sense to you, that destroy your due process rights, that do it without any hearing, that do it without any due process. Send a letter that at least asks for more time to respond on such a rule as would destroy all rights without proper disclosure or hearing. At least make that simple sentence. Send in hundreds of requests to extend time. I'm telling you need it on this one. This is one of the ways that you can stop it. Slow it up. They want this one. They may just get this one just because they want this one. And they're going to get it, I think, because we're crickets. Whether that's spelled with a K or a C. But we have an opportunity to engage. We have an opportunity to become the army that we need to be. And then we can all pool our energy together. And if they do make this a rule, we go after it with the proper record, even within their corrupt courts, to do at least what? But to warn the prairie dogs what's just gone on and what's happening. And maybe just if that's the case, maybe we'll stop being the prairie dog that hides in the hole. Maybe we'll pull out the 45 that we're holding behind our back, like that little mouse with the eagle coming down on it in the last second. I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of a perpetual optimist, I know. But beyond even a lot of guys and the girls in the chat, I know. I don't make excuses, though, about why this thing can't get done. This is a war that we can't lose or we lose. It's pretty simple. And so Gary puts together a bunch of information. The way it was put together, I didn't appreciate what it was actually telling me. Come later, a couple days, some other people pick it up. And they're going on, and it says, you'll get this link in the blogcaster as well. Apprehension. This isn't comprehend. This isn't taking in information. This is apprehension. You're being abducted, folks. So these words are kind of interesting as well. Apprehension. You're being taken in, all right, but not in your mind. Either physically taken in or taken in by the dupe. Apprehension, detainment, They call it detainment. If you're held longer than 20 to 40 minutes, it used to be 20 minutes. Now it's up to 40. That's an arrest, folks. And I call it abduction because they're doing it under pretext and the pretense of things, whether or not they exist, and on unilateral discussion. This is, again, NDAA. A committee will make the decision on whether you become quarantined, whether or not you are affected. Should scare you, should terrify you, not to the point of blaming me, the messenger, but to action. To say, you ain't, no, I'm just saying no, that ain't happening here, not on my watch. And I don't mean the clock that's taking your pulse, sending it to Apple computer either. Apprehension, detainment, and vaccination for suspicion of infection. The CDC's quarantine proposal. Now, again, I wish I just don't have the time to read all this stuff and read it with my eyes to help you all at this point. But this report goes on to say, explain just as in more of a matter than strictly there's a danger here, folks. This, like Gary L. was doing, this one says it just kind of gives you little parts and pieces that explain what the problem is, such as your dry cough one day for a couple days may be a signal to officers to ask you to come with them, and you won't have a way to say no. Again, remember, I've told you the symptoms they do all look like flu, no matter what you have. And so if you have the flu symptoms, that'll be enough. You won't dare sneeze because you got an allergy. You won't dare sneeze because a bug flew up your nose. Because there might be someone in earshot that'll say, we need to take you in. And that could spread like wildfire, like one of the movies I saw. It sounds science fiction-y, but the rule is here at talk about a doorstep. This easily is a doorstep for us in this regard. There's nothing tangible that we're going to be able to measure proximity. It's right in our face. That I'm hesitating with words because I don't have any. This is such a threat. They're coming by everything I've told you would be the worst way we would want them to come as a government, through their police power, on a health advisory. And I don't want to get into the nuances of how ludicrous their herd immunity thing is, and that they're claiming, as I reported, that they're claiming that once the immune herd is endangered by those that didn't get the vaccine, even though the herd is the one that's actually issuing out the vector, and by definition they ought not to be able to be affected more by those that are not. There's such nonsense behind this. It's hard to even begin to start with this, that we at least need more time. I would ask you, if you didn't know anything else to do, write a letter. Start it by asking for more time. Get at least informed on the basics to at least step yourself in. This other website's got a little bit of the document. You got a link. You're going to have to read this thing ultimately to see what's going on, so you stand on it. They make such open-ended definitions on these. We need a team of people addressing this. If we don't, there is no joke. One day you'll walk under, like I said in the beginning, one more DHS checkpoint. We'll be literally taking people to quarantine camps, these concentration camps. The more restricted one, not the one they let you go around on the highways on. That there's also a video out that was actually, I think, Gary L. actually put with this, that called my attention to it even more starkly, because it's a video and the guy's going through it a little bit better. All these things give you points to consider, to go find, to go look in your laws, to say, hey, whoa, that you need to articulate. No different than I see, I've asked Vince, take down your notes of what was important to you, but I'd like to hear on your broadcast, what are your thoughts about that? is no different than me asking you, take the notes you find here, making the list of things that are someone else that's interested is find as harms, and see if they resonate with you enough to then form an opinion about whether or not you initially have an initial response, an opinion without research, and then go do the research on the things that strike you, that just hit you, realize it just hits you. This is not right. That needs to be stopped. Take that list, go research those points that struck you, and make your own comment about that on point of what this rule set's going to do and what it's about. I got another link here. I went through a whole lot of different things. There was different websites that were giving the information out, and one of them also is a Pissing on the Roses blog spot, and they have the video there as well, and their title is CDC Gives Itself the Power to Indefinitely Detain Healthy People en masse without appeal. Now, I don't know where they got the right to suspend habeas corpus, but see, that would be at least one more thing you would add on, since I didn't say it before, because this intends to suspend the writ of habeas corpus where there's no right to suspend. We need a lot more time here to decide this one. You don't have that jurisdiction to make a rule that suspends that, in the least, let alone the rest. Is a statement, sentence. You can go back to the Plastcast when I post it, and you can, or go get it on YouTube that Vince helps out to put on. You get the raw form there. Later on, I'll do the one that has a lot of the sound, the noise taken out. Any of this noise you get on live, I try to take out and put the close on. Not my clothes, but the close of this audio. And you can go through and take what I just said just a moment ago, write it down. Look at it. If it's grammatically correct, sometimes I don't speak so accurately, but make it correct for what you're saying, and put that down as well. It's not that hard to come up with something to make a record that you never got a chance to make the rule, which now suspends the habeas corpus to give you the standing to go in and argue against this, that didn't follow the Administrative Procedures Act. I'm thinking this is the least we can do, really. The least anyone can do. How can you not be interested that you're going to work one day, unbeknownst to you, there's a unilaterally declared health emergency, and you don't get to work? How about the reverse? You're coming home. You heard about this thing coming from work, and you hit a roadblock. And everyone that's coming into that roadblock is told to go to a school, to get on a bus. You're going somewhere else. You never go home. CDC says we can round them up and throw away the key. Well, CDC says. Who is CDC, folks? They have more power than you. Are you going to stand back and let this happen? I mean, I'm thinking I don't even have the words to describe this treason against our own people under the color. There's another phrase. You're doing it under the color of authority. That's the pretense and pretext. And let's add another one here, folks. They make a record that they're presumed to be helping the people, the presumption of which has never been tested. The fact that they want to take away your habeas corpus rights of which proves they don't have your best interests at heart, to show that this rule is made by someone committing treason under the color of authority, a felony in property and a felony in right, the coercion. Theft by extortion and felony coercion. Am I the only one that has these words? I'm asking at that point, are those words even sufficient? But I would put those words down in the minimum and press a stamp, because I now know you don't, I was told you don't lick them anymore, you press them, and send it out, folks. And yes, wait for the black helicopter to come outside your window, because that's probably what's going to happen, you all you tinfoil hat wearing excusers, pretenders. It's time for the action, folks, and it's not that hard. And I'm finding out when you do all that, don't stop the fear. That's the other two. That's another stalking horse. They use that one really, really well against us. They want to have a part of the issue here about putting forced, what was the title on that one? Just going from the titles on these. Vaccination for suspicion of infection? Where was your due process rights to not suffer the consequences that are delineated in the product data sheet? What authority do they have to put that on you? And then let's get over to the things that I've been telling you can prove are fabricated. The WHO, not the Rot Group, not the OWL, but the WHO, the World Health Organization, fabrication of pandemic is evidence in this point right here. But the vaccinations for suspicion of infection, they can't even prove can do what they are doing. And they can't show that they're not invented for the purpose. That if you just pulled this information that they have in the legal, either legal, that's right, in the vaccine court, or in the science so-called manuals, reports, you pull that together as the evidence to counter the presumption that they do right in your comment. I'm just giving you places to go. This is no excuse for this. I can't imagine. When I start to think about it, this is how my mind works. I'm responding to a thing that's going on. The answers start to come fairly quickly, at least where we begin. And to me, then I say for y'all, it's not that hard. If you're not thinking this way, you have been inculcated to not think this way. You better think about that. But don't think too long, because the real danger is they're going to force, I think, medical experiments on people as well. They fabricate. Listen, we got Cynthia. We just talked. This came up. They're going to talk about put fracking fluids in the Gulf. Tongue in cheek, I responded, they need to feed Cynthia. Cynthia is a synthetic bacteria that's taking over the Gulf. They have to keep, the War Department has to keep viable organisms that they can use in war. Remember, Battlefield America, your enemy combatant. You think, what we're told about what happened in Germany, you think that doesn't continue here? Why would it be so hard to at least take my lead on my suggestions? Maybe I'm off point. Find that I'm off point. Go to the point you have to be. Write it down. Press a stamp, folks. Address, envelope, and press a stamp. Follow it up with an email. Do something and persist. Follow up. Find others that are doing the same thing, so you have a group of people that can go in when they say otherwise, and enjoin that rule until you get a fair hearing, even by the Administrative Procedures Act. Because if you don't, you have no right to complain. Absolutely zero right. And one day I guess we'll hear you complaining from the quarantine center that you have no right to talk about where someone unilaterally was able to take your rights away. And just because they pretended that there was some, well, they don't have to pretend if they're making it up, don't they? Oh, it was for real that we made up. And are you going to listen? Okay, I made my request, folks. I don't know what else to say. It's a simple one-page, not even a one-page letter. Can you do that much? Why can't you do that much? And if you're not going to do that much, why are you listening to me? Now, just as I'm building my listenership, it seems to slowly come back up to where I started when I first came from Oracle to RLM, where we dropped off a whole lot of people, but I still had a few hanging on. Just as I'm saying, why are you listening to me? See, I'm going to sabotage my own listenership, because some of you won't. You won't even lift a pen. In the day of computer, you won't lift a key. You'll type forever in the chat rooms. You'll type forever in the emails and Twitters. And why can't you take a couple Twitters worth of information, put it in a computer on get it to a piece of paper, put an address on it, stick it in an envelope with an address, and press a stamp and send it, and then stick to that. Make that a project whenever you have to. You put 10, 15 minutes the day you need to send another letter out. Do some 15 or 20 minutes of reading on the subject matter you're going to respond. Why isn't this matter something you can do something about better than NDAA? Something you can actually get involved. Why? Why would you not do that? And if you won't do that much, why do you listen to me? Why do you contaminate the chat rooms? Why do you contaminate the Twitters or the email sphere? with all this other nonsense? Can't we focus on something? And why wouldn't this be one of those things? markonthebeast@yahoo.com. As I'm saying, I need to have a bearing other than my shamanism thing. I need to understand the Indians I'm watching do nothing while the ships approach. Because at some point I know I'm not insane, but it sure feels like it. And I'm wondering why you all are insane for not responding to this imminent threat. Those of you that have decided to write the letter, excuse me for carrying on and going on. And I'm not going to convince those that have either already turned me off or turn me off by listening, or just think, okay, that's a good idea, I'm going to go, make my lunch, which I thank you for all listening while you're doing other things. But there's got to be a point when you start focusing some time on what starts to be important. I think this rises to that level, so markonthebeast@yahoo.com for an email on why it doesn't. Why won't you respond? And I don't even send me an email if you say, because it won't matter. That's just an excuse. And you have to remember, I'm not perfect. I make my own mistakes. We don't do everything I'd like to do. I don't have the energy to do what I know needs to be done. I do what I can. But I don't make excuses. Oh yeah, I have hesitations. Oh yeah, it takes a while to pull something together, and then that wears on me too. But one day it pops out of me and I got a letter sitting and I send it off. Where's your letters? And I'm telling you, the ripple, I'm acting and I feel like I'm not even a grain of sand in the ocean, and I'm still sending that letter, folks. I'm still making the communication with someone who's going to go talk to someone if that's what they do. Why don't we get together to do that? Where is our forum together to do that? It's really been an astonishing thing for me to see amongst all of us. 5 different chat rooms to go to. Everyone's just chatting up things and talking about what we talk about, and we do what we do, and we talk what's important, and we talk what's not important, and we laugh amongst ourselves, and yet none of us really settles down and does the one thing that we really had to do and take 20 minutes to do it. I know I'm talking in absolutes, but I'm not. Those of you that do this, I can't thank you enough. But we can't stop. We can't just keep learning. You can't just keep listening to me without dipping your toe in that water. Whether or not you roll your whole grain of sand into the ocean, become a part of the mass of filling up the stinking abyss with your rejection of its existence. So they're going to impose that. They're going to get their, there's going to be, I can just see different scenarios. They're going to find out that there's various areas that are not getting their vaccines. They're going to call them vector areas. They'll go in and require vaccines now underneath this health quarantine. And if you give them any lip, you'll be put down and put away. Maybe put away for a longer time, and maybe put down. How's that? Because no lives matter. The bottom line matters, but no lives. And until we, as people, figure that out and stop our division and start focusing on this, we're not going anywhere. So am I saying that's all we got to do is focus? No, we have to break away and do certain things. But at some point, each one of us has to be honest with ourselves. Did we work enough to write a simple little letter that stopped an atrocity, another war crime against people who were told we were never ever supposed to see this because there was so much guarantees in place? So how's that been working for you, folks? Well, we be crickets. How could we not know the rest of the universe existed only because of the fog before our face? We didn't know the universe was out there for the fog until the spaceship fell out of the sky in the land of cricket. Is that you, folks? Is that us? Is that who we are? I'm really getting to the end of my moment in some of this. But let me ask you one more thing. Another vaccine bombshell, glyphosate, think MonSatan Roundup, confirmed in most vaccines. Another article, is that what they're going to inject you with as they move the bottom line on in these? You don't think there's a lot, but you do millions of something, a little bit, a million drops of water is quite a bit of water when you get them all in one area. That if you're being given money, thousands of dollars by a couple of ounces, it makes a big money to the corporations. Are you going to be subject to the vaccine court on all this as well, while they force this law on you? Are you going to sit back and watch this go on to your sons and daughters as well, and their sons and daughters? This is what you're allowing. And then you should turn around and say, listen, this is a threat to all of us. I want you to write a letter. Who'd have thunk it? MonSatan Roundup in your herbicide. Well, I mean, yeah, herbicide in your vaccines. An herbicide. Well, maybe that'll kill the fungus in us too. Maybe so. That most of us probably suffer anymore, unless you're paying attention. What part of that would MonSatan would that play? But something to incite your system, right? Or to bind up chemicals that are trying to respond to these things. I guess there's a video on this thing. We got all this information. There's a video talking about it. CDC whistleblower talking all about it again. You take these facts and put them in a note, folks. I don't know how much I've contributed to help. I know I've said some things I think that would go valid in a letter, at least your first one. I don't know if I'm the rah-rah guy that gets you to do it. I hope you do that on your own. I don't know how valuable this knowledge is to you, whether or not you've already clicked away, or even at my instance to say, click away if you're not listening to what I'm saying. If you're not going to do something with this, I really don't know why anybody's listening to me. And when I go down to 0 listeners like what I had when I first started doing broadcasts, I realize that I've got nothing to say to anybody. So I do appreciate that people listen. I do appreciate the pastcast listeners. I do appreciate the podcast listeners. But listening is not enough. And the rubber is meeting the road for us as people, folks. I don't know, really. I'm silent. I'm here, just sitting here. I don't know what to do. I'm not the Tony Robbins behind the woodshed to get you to be all inspired to go make your life better. That should just be part of the principle in you. I say should. Maybe that's prejudicially putting a pressure on you, a trigger word. I don't know. But that's an excuse, because the bottom line is they're coming, folks. They're coming after you. They're giving themselves all the record to do so. And we're sitting here with dupe in our mouth for a response. Oh, don't go after the felonies the cops did when they set up a collusion against me. No, I'm going to go talk about how wrong it is. They just shouldn't have done that. And, well, that was just disrespectful to me. No, it's crime, folks. Call it out. Find it out so you know. Don't just call them criminals. You find them by elemental cause that they're criminals. You lay it out, and then you lay it on them, and you keep walloping them. You bring them behind your own woodshed. You bring them behind a woodshed, and you wallop them with the facts and the law and their criminal nature and their criminal continuance. You keep talking about, constitutional this and that. Yes, it's there. Why don't you know it better than just to say, recite these things ad infinitum, ad nauseum, without power? You didn't. It's fine you didn't take an agreement to it. They did. Did you miss that one? They did. Thank you very much today. I think I'm done. Just don't know what more to say to y'all. Appreciate that you do tune in. I'd appreciate that you take my words and start putting them in application for the things that you find wrong that you need to make right. I don't care how small that thing is. It becomes a habit for you after a while. Do it better than we understood to do it before, which did get people in trouble. I think I'm suggesting ways that are much more methodologies that work much better. I know they work for us. Thank you to Grimner for reallibertymedia.com, the place for the broadcaster and the podcast, and what he does and what you do, Grimner, and with Bo Diddy on freedomsnetwork.com, and Jules over at UCY, and the past cast and the simulcast. I do appreciate that. Grammy Mary, thanks for the Spreaker line. Folks, there's lots of places to find the broadcast. Lots of places, more than I can remember. I don't even have a list. I got to make a list now. I hope it's helping. And then the terrestrial broadcasters throwing your part in, I do appreciate that. And wherever you are doing that, and if you have a broadcast network that has a slot on Sundays, we can port that on over and do it live. I know I don't do